Hello everyone, nubkeks here. Welcome back to Nub Raids. We have the full details. Everything we need to know about the new mythical champion. He's a Force Affinity mythical. He's coming from the new clan boss, the Chimera. We're going to be checking him out today, which is very cool. We've got the full details on both of his forms. I'll be explaining absolutely everything, including a new buff. Before we do, I do have some bad news though. I've got some bad news. There was an amazing offer in the game. I'm recording this video a day early. This offer is probably gone. But I thought this is brilliant, guys. 43% extra on this offer. I love that. Instead of one Eternal Soul Stone, you're getting 43% extra. You're getting one Eternal Soul Stone. Wow. You guys missed that. Black Friday really coming in hot this year. Whoo! Oh boy. The savings. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. We also have, hang on, let me get this. Here it is. Yes, here's his Form 2. Oh, he looks so cool, man. Form 2, visually, just 10 out of 10. This guy is unbelievably creepy. Yes. The eye moving, that's next level. Let's take a look, though. Let's go. Base form time. So, again, I'm not 100% sure whether you get this champion. You get fragments for him, like you collect Mithrala fragments. You're going to be collecting for this guy. I don't know if you get fragments from the base Chimera clan boss, or if it's only from the Chimera Clash. From their preview video, it looked like it was from the Chimera Clash, but I'm not 100% sure about that. And honestly, that also seems like the sort of thing that's probably subject to change up until the thing is released. But let's take a look and see what we can do. So he is a Force Affinity mythical for the Knights Revenant. He is support in Form 1. In Form 2, he's HP. He's going to be a nuker in Form 2, a damage dealer. And in Form 1, he's more about control. Let's take a look. Let's go backwards through the kit. Honestly, makes more sense these days. With Wrongful Existence with an entirely new debuff. Whenever an enemy is killed, places one Necrosis stack on all other enemies. These cannot be resisted or blocked. Necrosis stacks can only be removed by reviving dead allies. It doesn't work against bosses and their minions. If multiple champs are on the team with this skill, the effect activates only once. Now, that's just sort of how Necrosis works in general. I'll explain that in a second. One thing that's unique about this is at the start and the end of this champion's turn, instantly activates any Necrosis stacks on all enemies, which is very cool. What is Necrosis? Let me zip me over here again. Necrosis is a brand new debuff. When an enemy champion dies, Necrosis stacks placed on all other alive enemies. When another champion dies, then another one goes on, and so on. So basically, this is a debuff that is equal to the number of dead allies on your team. So let's say I'm in an arena fight against 4 enemies. If one of them is dead, the other 3 have 1 Necrosis stack. If I kill another one, now there's 2 Necrosis stacks in the last 2. If they revive one, it removes the Necrosis stack. They've got 1 dead ally, they're back to 1. That's how it works. What does Necrosis actually do? Necrosis does damage equal to 5% of a champion's max HP at the beginning of their turn. This is basically like a poison debuff is 5%. It's basically that, but it doesn't expire. It's just it's kind of like a permanent poison stack that's just always there. Kind of simple. Doesn't get improved or anything by lethal dose or anything like that, though. For example, if a champion has 3 Necrosis stacks, they'll get 15% max HP damage at the start of their turn. And putting that together, I think that's where the powerful part. Oh my god, I can't find the right spot. You know, I'll put up here. This is the perfect place for me to go. Right. So not only with Necrosis, like 1 Necrosis stack. Let's say enemies have 2 Necrosis stacks. Not only would they take 10% max HP at the start of their turn, like a poison, this guy, Embrys, is also going to activate it at the start of his turn and then again at the end of his turn. That could add up to a ton of damage. Like as soon as anyone on the enemy team starts to die, he can start popping those things. It's pretty spicy, actually. Necrosis stacks do not decrease upon activation at the beginning of a turn. And Necrosis is placed on a champion irrespective of the number of debuffs that are currently on them. So I'm curious about this. So right now in the game, there's a 10 debuff limit. Also, there's a 10 buff limit as well. I wonder if this will be an 11th debuff that can go on. I kind of hope so, because it's quite a special one. It would make sense. But it does seem to be suggesting that. I'll try to confirm that with Plarium. We'll figure it out. Damage dealt by Necrosis cannot be increased by other effects. And this is interesting. Placement of a Stone Skin buff will remove Necrosis. There are vanishingly few champions that can apply Stone Skin mid-battle. I was like, oh, there's the offer, by the way. I've got the bigger version. I found someone else's picture. My version's not as funny because it's 43%. I've got the Bender's version where it's 2 of them. So it's not as funny as the one Soulstone one. Sad, but there you are. Very few. Like Embrys in Form 2, right? Gives herself Stone Skin. So that would remove the Necrosis. Eilil, if he kills somebody, gives himself Stone Skin. Very few other champions. There'll probably be more in the future. I think they're the only 2. Could be wrong though. I think they're the only 2. Where were we? But yes, placing Stone Skin will remove Necrosis. But if there's any dead enemies after Stone Skin expires on one of the enemy champions, Necrosis will go back on. So let's say you've got a 4-person arena team. Let's say the 3 other people are dead. You're the 1 person left. 3 Necrosis stacks. I'm an Embrys. I put Stone Skin on. Stone Skin removes those 3 Necrosis stacks. When Stone Skin expires, the game then goes, you've got 3 dead allies. Bam, 3 Necrosis stacks back on you as soon as Stone Skin falls off. Okay? That's basically how it works. So yeah. When a dead enemy champion is revived, a single Necrosis stack is removed from all the alive enemies on that team. And if multiple champions are revived, it will remove that equal. So, long story short, unless I'm misinterpreting and maybe there's some weird shenanigans, it seems, broadly speaking, the Necrosis stacks that you have are equal to the number of dead champions on your team, basically. I think is essentially how it works. So, that's what's going on. So this guy, he's applying Necrosis, right? He is applying Necrosis. I guess he probably has to be alive for that to happen. And yeah, then he's popping Necrosis, which doesn't run out, I believe. He's popping it at the start and the end of his turn, so just doing extra damage. I don't think the Necrosis debuff, I don't think it has a duration. It just stacks, and it's permanent until you revive whoever's dead. He's got his Metamorph. He transforms with an extra turn, standard on the 4-turn cooldown. The Unmaking. Let's actually zoom in a bit here. Attacks all enemies, removes any Stone Skin buffs, replaces them with True Fear debuffs. Block debuffs will be replaced with block buffs. Also removes any buffs positively affecting stats, replaces them with their mirrored debuff equivalent. So increased attack becomes decreased attack, continuous heal goes to heal reduction, strengthen to weaken, and so on. Mirrored debuffs will have the same duration as the buffs before they were replaced. I'm pretty sure it's the same thing here. A 1-turn Stone Skin becomes 1-turn True Fear. 2-turn Stone Skin becomes 2-turn True Fear. And same for block debuffs. Also, do note... Actually, let's read the rest of this first before we talk about the problem with the Stone Skin thing. He then steals 5% of each target's turn meter for every buff converted into a debuff by this skill. That's a steal. And then he decreases the turn meters of all enemies by 20%. These effects cannot be resisted if enemies have any Necrosis stacks, which is kind of interesting. Now, Stone Skin should still have a 50-50 to stop this. There's been discussion happening in content creator chat. I'm 99% sure, I'm afraid to say, this is not a guaranteed Stone Skin counter. It's still a 50-50, right? You still have to roll the dice for every enemy under Stone Skin. Will it work? Will it not? So... yeah, it will obviously always work against the block debuffs. So that's good. But yeah, it won't work. I also don't know how this would interact with protected buffs either. I'm actually not sure about that. Like if you got protected block debuffs, can he do it? I'm not sure. It's interesting. So certainly if you throw him in as a fast champion, it's sort of like an anti-Stone Skin buff strip, but you're running the risk. It's a little bit sketchy. Honestly, it's almost better when they don't have Stone Skin. Like you go up against someone like a Sifi or something like that. It's got increased defense, increased speed, block debuffs. This guy comes in. It's like, yo, Sifi, cool. I'm in a supersonic set or something. Yo, cool, great. I'll take all that turn meter. You put up all those buffs, loads of turn meter from supersonic. And yeah, all right, let me turn. your increased defense into decreased defense, your increased speed to decreased speed, your block debuffs to block buffs. I'm going to steal 15% turn meter from your entire team, which is pretty much going to catapult me towards my next turn. And I'll also push your turn meters back by 20% just for good measure. So he actually seems kind of better. It's quite powerful in combat. I think my initial thought when I saw this was, oh, it's the anti-stone skin thing. But, I mean, 50% of the time against somebody under stone skin, it does literally nothing. So it's like, it does something against stone skin, but I actually don't think it's any better than, it's not that much better than a normal buff strip against people in stone skin, honestly. But it's very strong against block debuffs, and it's very good against people with just buffs in general. Void Stare. Sorry, that also, by the way, has a 4-turn cooldown when booked. Void Stare places True Fear on all enemies for 1 turn and a 50% decrease attack on all enemies for 2 turns. Cannot be resisted if enemies have Necrosis, then gives an extra turn. So he has 4-turn cooldowns on both of his moves, but this extra turn mechanic kind of makes it more like 3-turn cooldown, actually quite short. And I think this extra turn is also particularly scary because of that passive. Like, if anybody is dead, if anyone is dead, that extra turn is giving you potentially an extra 2 pops of Necrosis, which is kind of crazy. I will say, when you metamorph, right, I don't think that technically counts as the end of your turn. So, for example, I've got Lazarius, yeah? And Lazarius, he can revive he revives a random ally at the end of his turn. If you metamorph, it doesn't activate the passive, right? So I don't think, if you metamorph the extra turn, you're not going to get this extra proc at the end of your turn. But you should do with Void Stare because you're staying in his base form. I'm not 100% sure. It should definitely trigger the extra start of his turn one. It might trigger the end of his turn as well, I think. I guess we'll have to test it to fully confirm. It's an okay move, right? AoE True Fear. The decreased attack is okay. For a mythical, it's not super exciting, to be honest. But it's okay. AoE True Fear. It's okay. Bedded Glaive then attacks all enemies, destroys each target's max HP by 3% up to 30%, and increases the duration of 1 random debuff on all enemies by 1 turn. This effect cannot be resisted if they have Necrosis. I don't think you can increase True Fear duration, so that sucks. But you could increase these negative buffs, which is okay. Yeah, but, you might end up just increasing the decreased attack, which is only useful on a small number of champions. Like, there's plenty of champions that simply don't care if they've decreased attack or not. So he's an interesting champ. I think a lot of his power does seem to come from, blowing up this Necrosis. It's interesting. He's a lot of True Fear as well. True Fear is like a 50-50, I think. You miss your turn. And if you miss your turn, it puts your skill you try to use on cooldown if it's an active skill. But it's risky. Like, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. There is, of course, that new blessing that nobody ever uses. This one, where if you miss your turn because of True Fear, it will decrease the cooldown of your skill and give you turn meter. That's a pretty hard counter to this guy's Form 1. But I don't think people are really, unless True Fear becomes a lot more common, going to be using that too much. Also, something interesting to consider, he was a guaranteed champion. He's been buffed not once, but twice. And he's still irrelevant. Could Fortis actually come back into the meta? Is this the time? One thing to know, they are both Knight Revenant, guys. And Fortis increases the chance of enemy skills failing by 15% when they're under fear or True Fear. And Fortis scales off of Fear and True Fear. Okay. Unlocks his extra skill. The two champions actually combo very well. Certainly for any faction-based content, that would be very powerful. I wonder what the faction unity... I mean, if the faction unity is like some sort of like reviver potentially or increased defense for Fortis. I mean, if the faction unity champion does tie into Fear or True Fear, it could be an interesting combo. It could be. It's something to watch. Will it be strong or important to have? I don't think so, but it could be a fun little thing. Yeah, if we should be due the Knights Revenant faction unity relatively soon, and it'll be out before you can get your hands on this guy, before you collect all the fragments. It might go well together. Interesting. So that's Form 1. Form 1, all about that control. Let's look at Form 2. Form 2 is alternate form. It's a HP-based nuker. By the way, the aura is 35% HP in all battles. I missed that. That's the same. Yes, the same. So big HP aura for all battles. It's decent. For arena, you really, 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 really want speed. Now, that meta might change a bit, but probably not. I don't know. I think by the time you get this guy, you're probably still running speed auras in arena. You nearly always are. It's okay. Yeah, it would be good for other places, I suppose. It's all battle, so that's good. This guy's got really fun passive. Degenerator. When this champion dies, reflects damage equal to 50% of the fatal hit back to the attacker, including any surplus damage. That's hilarious. So he will just delete people. Like, he's a HP based damage. He actually scales his damage scales on HP and accuracy. So I think you're going to be building this champion with a lot of speed, a lot of HP and accuracy, and probably not much defense. So he's actually going to reflect a ton of damage back. Whenever an enemy is killed, puts a necrosis on all other enemies, and blah, blah, blah. It's the same stuff. Doesn't work against bosses, they're minions. But yeah, so he's still applying necrosis, right? Same thing. Necrosis is just in the fight whenever this guy is alive. Simple as. So there you are. Simple as that. Now, the active effect makes this way better. It's got a 5-turn cooldown. If this champion is about to get killed by a fatal hit, preempts that hit, and instantly puts Revive on Death on him for 1 turn before the damage is taken. I love this. So you're about to be slammed down by an enemy. The dude's like, I'm about to die. Revive on Death. He dies, and then he reflects massive amount. He just one-shots them with the reflected damage, and then he pops back from Revive on Death, which is, I think, honestly, hilarious. I think it's brilliant. Very, very funny. He's got his Metamorph, as usual. I think that's a very powerful passive, right? I think it's pretty strong. Like, you could, against an enemy team that only has, like, 1 damage dealer and no reviver or something, like, you could just kill their damage dealer with this passive, survive it, Revive on Death, and, you know, you might just win the fight. Just simple as that. There's a lot of potential there. Your life is forfeit is A3, 4-turn cooldown when booked. Swaps HP with an enemy. If the target's a boss, fully restores his destroyed max HP and fully heals him instead. Each time this skill is used, increases his ignore defense effects by 10%, while in his alternate form up to 50%. Woo, and gives an extra turn. That's very, very strong. Yeah, that's very strong. So, like, in a longer fight, I mean, it's going to take you a good while to get there, right? But, I mean, every single time you do this, it's a pretty appreciable jump to your damage. Like, I'm intrigued. Like, maybe you don't even run him in like lethal or something. Like, you could, and it's going to snowball you a bit. But, I mean, after a couple of uses of this, you know, you're pretty golden with some Helm Smasher procs. Like, you might be okay. So I'm definitely intrigued to see. Do you just run him in lethal and just have him hitting way harder, way earlier? Or do you go like, I'm just going to run this guy like super fast and like, I don't know, in a bit of pinpoint or something like that. So he's not going to get turned into a sheep by trying to place True Fears in Form 1 and Necrosis. I'm guessing Necrosis might trigger sheep as well. So am I running him in like Feral or something? Or it's an interesting question. There's an extra turn though baked into this. Atomize is A2. 3-turn cooldown. Now, that's, again, kind of scary, because you could do 3-turn cooldown, AoE attack. This is a big AoE. Big AoE. Then pop this for an extra turn. You're getting back to your big AoE pretty quickly. But this is a big AoE. Attacks all enemies. Double damage to enemies whose accuracy is lower than this champion's accuracy. Ignores 50% defense against targets whose accuracy is equal to or higher than this champion's accuracy. That's crazy. I actually don't know which is better. You know, I will say against Harima nerfs ignore defense effects, but then her accuracy is almost definitely going to be lower than his. So he's actually going to be pretty nice against Harima, right? He's just going to delete her with this A2, pretty much. Just double damage smack, right? Then higher accuracy enemies. I don't know. Do high accuracy enemies have high defense? I don't know if they do. Maybe against a Galathea or something, it'd be pretty good. It's intriguing. I'm very curious to see how the math sort of works out on this one. I mean, I do think like with Lethal and Helm Smash, like just Lethal and Helm Smasher together plus 50%, you're ignoring 100% defense. It's very, very powerful. Also, again, once you start stacking up some of this ignore defense, that's going to stack with it. I mean, in theory, once he's used this skills 5 times in like a Hydra or whatever, this move is just going to be ignoring 100% defense always, which is like, that's a lot. just from his core kit, so it takes a long time to ramp that up, but it's still interesting. Then his A1, Unmaker's Blade, attacks one enemy, extra hit if the target is any Necrosis stacks, and puts block revive if this attack kills an enemy. That gets 30% damage from books, by the way. That's brutal. So if anyone on the enemy team is dead, his A1 becomes disgusting. Especially if, like, he can swap HP and leave you at low HP. That's busted, guys. Like, that's insane. Block revive. So, yeah. Pretty cool. Pretty cool. My initial thoughts. I'm not sure how good he's gonna be, right? It's tough to make that call, but like Form 1 seems interesting. It does seem like he is gonna struggle though with polymorph. And it seems like although he's sort of kind of supposed to counter Stone Skin, it's still the 50-50. It doesn't work. I think it's kind of interesting though. It is kind of interesting. His Form 2 definitely seems to me very solid. HP-based nukers are great. I think it's actually nice that this mythical is Force, right? Because you get Carnage, who's Spirit. And then, like, they're always, like, God, so many magic nukers in this game. It feels like, you know, every fusion is a magic attack-based champion, it feels like sometimes. So getting a Force-based champion is actually pretty nice. I like his affinity a lot. I think that's great. I think he gives a lot of players, like, a pretty decent champ against Harima, for instance, which is cool. Yeah, I think his A3 is very powerful. I think I'm very interested to see. Like, I think a lot of it comes down to how this Necrosis stuff feels to play in actual impact. And I definitely wonder if you do run him like as like a fast support and you don't even focus on the damage for him, and he might just destroy people anyway, you know? Like, he might be strong enough to just wreck people. Or like, yeah, I mean, you could just wear them down with Form 1, and then if anyone ever gets low on life, or if he ever gets low on life, you swap his form, swap HP with an enemy, and if anyone is dead, he can just block revive, right? That's crazy, you know? If any enemy is dead at any point, there's this constant threat that this guy can switch form and just kill them, block revive, which is very useful. I also think it's very useful for players in general. He reminds me a lot of like a support Lazarius build, right? Where you could build Lazarius for support, but then he always has the option to flip to Form 2. And even if you don't build him for damage, he's still going to do good damage. It might be similar with this guy. I think that he's going to really, really want a soul. A soul will do a lot. Like, he really wants accuracy, attack, HP, defense will make him live longer. It's pretty nice. Yeah, he might be like a 9-piece feral. It's kind of funky, but could totally happen. Gives him block debuffs, lots of speed and accuracy, 50-50 to resist polymorph, and allies doing more damage for every debuff you place. Like, he can potentially place a lot, actually. It could be fun. Could be fun. Yeah, I don't know. I'm very intrigued. I think he's cool. Very interested to see how strong he will actually be in practice, but I think for most players, he certainly looks like a really fun champion. Like, that for me is what I'm always looking for when it comes to mythicals, is are they doing like something special and unique? You know, it kind of sucks if they just sort of blend in and it's the same as any old champion. Like a fight with Embrys in there is like very distinctly an Embrys fight, right? It's like, oh, okay, there's this Necrosis stuff. He's swapping buffs. Oh, he's got the whole block revive. Like, there's a lot of very specific, very fight impacting things he can do. And that's exactly what I want with a mythical. I have to try him out to see how good it ends up being. But I think he's obviously absolutely worth getting. I think every mythical really is where even the bad mythicals will hopefully eventually get buffed. But they're all worth having. And can be really impactful for any account. I mean, honestly, like, big Krakens will be the ones that benefit probably the least. They'll get him first, but they have so many other mythicals. It's not a huge deal. Whereas I think for a lot of normal players, I think most players have maybe Lady Mikage, and that might even be it. Or I think even longer term players are probably getting close to, if you've gone to Mercy, getting close to Mercy for primals, perhaps. I've seen a good few comments say that they've pulled, you know, close to 200 primals free to play and no mythical yet. Like, you could be getting there. You will get there soon. So I think we'll be in a spot by the time people start getting this guy. I think long-term players will probably have 1 to 2 mythicals roughly by the time you can get him. And I think that he could be super helpful to an account. It's just useful having a nuker that can swap form. Helps you deal with lockout. It's pretty impactful. Force affinity, I think, is useful. So yeah, I think he's cool. I'm looking forward to getting him. My main thing for me, he seems like a lot of fun. But yeah, guys, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about Embrys. He's cool. Very intrigued for this faction unity for Knights Revenants now. Embrys Fortis. Who would have thought? Fortis. Will he be relevant, or will he continue to be irrelevant even with this guy? I don't know. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.